Morning, everybody. We're in second week of October 2021, and here with me today is a Zenith 650 that has a Viking 130 engine in it. It's had a 130 engine in it for quite some time, and we'll find out from the owner how many hours it has flown, and also what changes were just done and how the airplane is performing now.
Okay. All right. I'm Roger Jennings. I live in Port Orange, Florida. It's Spruce Creek Flying. I built the Zenith 650 in the early 2000s. It's a 2012 airworthiness certificate on it. It's got about 500 hours on it. And last April, I converted from the Jabiru 3300 Gen 2 engine to the Viking 130 with a straight mount on it and 23 on the pitch. And I had a little torque issue, little instability on takeoff and also in flight. So just recently, after 70 hours of flying under those conditions, which were totally acceptable, once you got up in on straight level flight, I converted to an offset mount and put the pitch back to 23 degrees, and the torque now is totally manageable. There's very little pressure required on the right rudder, and I'm getting a tremendous amount of forward speed at 4,800 RPM, approximately 145 true airspeed. She cruises at 5.9 gallons per hour at that under those conditions, but if you back it off, it can go under 4 gallons an hour at a nice 120 mile an hour cruise at around 4650.
All right, let's take a look at the actual modification that was recently done under the hood.
Okay, as far as modifications, I had to lift the engine off of the original mount, which was a straight motor mount, and we slid the offset mount in right behind it after taking all of the hoses off and clamps, etc. The offset brings it back a few inches and tilts it over 2.5 degrees. So it's basically compensating for the torque of the engine as well as the torque in the 23-degree pitch on the blade. But the improvement is remarkable. It's a normal pressure now on the rudder. Also, the center of gravity's moved backwards a little bit, so the nose is not as heavy. I'm not having to use as much up trim in the downwind position.
I see you even put a different air filter in order to compensate for moving the engine closer to the firewall.
This was Jan's idea because I was freaking out. Once I moved it back, there was no room back here, but he came up with this nice filter. It works fine. I get very good acceleration with the filter. It's a very clean installation. The plumbing for the cooling system was easily managed. I had to do some modifications, but otherwise it was extremely easy to do. This entire modification took about 8 hours labor to do, but over about a 2-day period.
Okay, and so the back of the engine is actually pointing, well, it's off center now, and the front is on center still.
Yes, and all I had to do was we put a new spacer in. I used a 4-inch spacer for the prop, and then I had to trim a little bit over here, and the clearance between the prop and the cowling now is about 6 millimeters, which is plenty. There were no other modifications required on the bottom or the top cowling. I did cut an optional oil door, which is right over there. Because the engine has moved back and over a little bit, I'm going to have to modify the oil door a little bit more so that I can access the dipstick. And also, if you'll notice the exhaust down here, my original hole was right here for the exhaust. Because the engine moved back, I had to cut a new access in here, and then all of this will be repaired with new fiberglass, and then I'll give it another coat of paint.
Okay, so the exhaust is actually in a little nicer place now because it's further away from that drop down in the cowling.
It is, yeah. It looks a lot nicer. So this will be an easy repair.
All right, well, thanks for showing up, and overall, less torque and maybe even a little more speed.
Quite a bit. Well, with the pitch, but the nice thing about it is my center of gravity is a little bit better. It's moved the weight back a little bit, so it's more manageable, and it appears to cruise a lot smoother and a lot more stable. And of course I'm getting around 145 miles an hour at 4,800 RPM, which is a little high for this configuration in the wing, but pulling it back, I get a really good cruise speed. I'm used to cruising around 120 miles an hour, 125. The Jabiru that I had in it, I cruised at about 130, but I felt that I was getting a lot of drag on the wing, so I would bring it back. Good fuel economy, but this is a much better configuration than the original that I had.
Now, Roger, you have a tip for that you use, and explain what you're doing to make the engine look so nice and protect your engine and your investment in your engine.
ACF 50, which you can purchase on Amazon and also Aircraft Spruce. You just completely soak the engine down. It's formulated for hoses, plastic, and metal, especially the aluminum on these engines. And all you do is, with a cool engine, just completely soak the engine down. Of course, don't put it on the belts or the air filter, cover those, and then let it sit and it wicks in, and then go ahead and run the engine and let it get really hot, and it coats everything nicely. Your first flight though, you're going to smell this, and it's going to persist for about 2 to 3 minutes on your high power settings. But after that, it makes a very nice coating over it, nice and shiny, looks brand new. I also use this on my automobile engines as well.
So it keeps the aluminum from corroding and keeps the hoses and everything nice and shiny and new looking, and more importantly, kind of protects it over the years so that the engine continues to look new. And obviously it also protects your hardware, your bolts. So,
and you can put it on electrical. I spray the tops of the batteries, contactors, everything, any metal surface, and also the firewall. The firewall is just totally bathed in it. It all drips off. You wipe the excess off and you're done.
You just mist it with like a mist bottle?
Yes, I just a regular spray bottle you can get at Walmart or whatever, and just spray the whole thing down.
Great idea. Now we talk about speed and all that, and it's quiet and it handles good, and obviously those are important. But for other people that are flying their 650 with a Viking around, or probably translates also to the 750 and other airplanes using this engine, what are you seeing for parameters like temperature, voltages, gearbox, things like that?
Well, the most important thing is your oil pressure. My oil pressure, when it gets hot, it falls down into the 20s and 30s, but at cruise, it stays above 50. I'm running around 65 PSI oil pressure. The gearbox temperature, it levels out at about 143 even on a hot day. And here we are in Florida, even on a 90-degree day, I've never seen it above 145. So, but the key is to have nice cooling right in here at the spinner. So, and then as far as fuel consumption, at the current pitch, I'm getting about 5.9. Worst case scenario, back it off and it gets down to about 4.2 gallons per hour, so very economical. The voltage, I always check the voltage at startup. It has to be 12 or above. I've got a little switch in there and a dual voltage indicator, but once I kick the alternator in, I get about 14.1. I've seen it up as high as 14.5, but it levels off usually at 14 volts.
And that's important to have charging voltage up there rather than down in the 13.5, 13.6, because you'll either you have a faulty indication or you'll never charge your battery properly.
Right. You know, and that's with everything on. All my avionics, both pumps going, you know, the full Monty, and I'm getting very good voltage.
Good. Thanks for the information.
You're welcome.